This is Grace and Glory podcast, where we are trying to find wives. I am Sean Kincaid. This is David Pena's on the mic with me. How you doing, David?
Good. You know, you always talking about women, about wives, about girls, and we were talking the other day.
I love girls
in the church parking lot. That they're becoming like an idol for you, man. You have to buck off.
That's not true. Dude, you're causing the mic to peak, bro. You can't yell.
I know. I did that on purpose, bro. I'm just saying that it's like girls. And I said, we need to go bungee jump. And then you said, well.
I don't even know what I said. What did I say?
You want me to say?
I don't remember what I said. So
you want me to remind you here?
Depends. Was it about Olivia?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
You said, no, bro, I need to get Olivia to go out with me so we can fly together for cheap.
Oh, no, because you were saying, let's go bungee jump in like Washington State.
Right.
I was like, yeah, no, that doesn't even make sense. I live in Virginia. I don't want to spend the money on a plane ticket to go to Washington State. I was like, once Olivia and I date, we'll get the cheap tickets, bro. Then we'll go to Washington State, and then we'll go bungee jump. That just makes more logical sense. That was more of a financial decision rather than like an idolatrous decision. So,
yeah, but it's you want to be doing awesome stuff. So then a woman sees you and is like, oh my God, that guy is awesome and handsome and sexy and loves the Lord. Oh my God, I'm going to follow him. You know what I mean? And that's when you can leave. Now, when your boys chase women out of their lives, real men let the women come to them.
Yeah, I just don't see that in Scripture, but nonetheless, we're in Exodus chapter 17. And right before we got here, we were eating manna. So if you're breathing right now, you're breathing the breath of life. If you're reading the Word, you're reading the bread of life. Jesus is the bread of life. But we see that the Israelites are complaining. They get manna, they get quails, and for 40 years, David is going out looking for manna on the Sabbath, even though God told him not to. But they ate manna for 40 years, but that's just kind of like the narrative thing where Moses is kind of inserting that into the story looking back. But nonetheless, if you want to learn a little bit about Exodus 16, listen to our last podcast. Or
just read Exodus 16.
Or just read Exodus 16. I mean, that's where you should start. That's kind of the obvious one that I didn't catch. But Exodus 17, verse 1, then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped in Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. So remember, they went to the place called Marah. They hadn't drank for 3 days, and God made the water sweet because he had Moses throw this log in there. They're in the same kind of deal. They're moving through the wilderness of Sin. Okay, so they leave the wilderness of Sin, and they camped in this place called Rephidim, and there's no water. Okay, so they're thirsty, and therefore the people contended with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." So contend means to like argue with, I think. I don't know. Let me Google it. Let me Google what contended means.
Contest, I feel that is arguing.
Yeah, I think it's arguing too, but let me just definition. Okay, we're going to find out here. Drum roll, please. Internet's not working too well. Whoa, I just Googled something I didn't mean to. Let's see. Contend means to struggle or surmount. No, struggle to a surmount. Or assert something as a position in an argument. So, yeah, they're like arguing. And as I said yesterday, I have allergies, so you're just going to have to kind of deal with it because I'm dealing with it. So, and we're in this together, guys. So, Moses said to them, "Why do you contend with me?" Ooh, he says, "Why do you tempt the Lord?" Remember when we like talked about like in the podcast number 2? We were like talking about God poking you with a stick, trying to like push your buttons. Well, they're pushing the Lord's buttons right now. So Moses says, "Why do you tempt the Lord?" Asking them by your grumbling, complaining, you're tempting the Lord. You're provoking him so that he might punish you. Like when a child is like throwing a tantrum and the dad's like, "Don't tempt me, boy." It's more like, don't tempt me, boy. And the kid shuts up. But the Israelites probably don't shut up. We'll find out here. Verse 3, and the people thirsted for water, and the people thirsted there for the water, and the people complained against Moses, so they continued to complain, and said, why is it that you have brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? So they're just complaining again. They'd rather be in slavery. They're stupid. So verse 4, Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, what shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me. So like it's at that point. They're so angry and they're so upset that they're just like, they want to stone Moses. They would rather have been enslaved in Israel or in Egypt and died there. Verse 5, and the Lord said to Moses, go on before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand the rod with which you struck the river, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in sight of the elders of Israel. Verse 7, so he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the contention of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? So he goes to this place where there's like a rock in Horeb. And God says he's going to stand before Moses there. And Moses did what the Lord said, and he took the elders with him. And then he calls this place Massah and Meribah. And its name is that because of the contention of Israel. So whatever Massah and Meribah means in Hebrew is the contention of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Verse 8, now Amalek came out and fought Israel at Rephidim, and Moses said to Joshua, choose us some men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So right here, if we look just a couple verses before, God's saying, I'm going to stand before you on the rock in Horeb, right? And here we're about to see that kind of fulfilled, is where Amalek is going to come and fight Israel in Rephidim, and the Lord's going to be with the Israelites here. So verse 9, and Moses said to Joshua, come, choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the rock, on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Verse 10, so Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. So Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands on the one side and on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So basically you have this picture of every time Moses is holding his hands with his rod, right, the staff of God, every time he holds that in the air, Joshua and the Israelites prevail over Amalek. And whenever Moses lets his hands down and he gets weary and puts his hands down, then Amalek and his army prevail against Joshua and the Israelites. So what they did was they sat a rock under Moses. Moses sits on the rock, and then Aaron on the one side and Hur on the other side are holding Moses' hands up so that he doesn't let his hands back down and the Israelites lose. So it reminds me of that song by the Beatles. I get by with a little help from my friends. So verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar called its name, the Lord is my banner. For he said, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So a couple things that I want to point out. One is right here we see Moses builds an altar and calls the name, the Lord is my banner. And oftentimes, even now, especially because, this is the Old Testament, it's not serious or whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the reason this is important is God's also a God of war, because he's a God of justice, he's a God of wrath, he's a God of love, and he's a God of mercy, but he's also a God of war. And he fights for his people. and it says the Lord is my banner. Like the Lord is the flag that I wave back and forth. Like when I'm fighting in the war, right? My like and we war not against flesh and blood, but in the spiritual world. But if my war is in that spiritual realm, but if I'm fighting in a war, right? Imagine I'm Israel and I'm fighting the war. They don't have an Israel flag. Their flag is God. They don't have that. We would wave the American flag, right? When we conquer a place, in war, like think Iwo Jima, we put the American flag up. So when the Israelites are conquering the Amaleks, rather than put a flag that says, property of Israel or whatever, or like an Israeli flag, and I don't know if it would even look like the current Israeli flag, but rather than put that there, they actually instead built an altar to the Lord, worshipped him, and called its name, the Lord is my banner. So that's the semblance there that I just kind of wanted to point out. And yeah, there was another thing, but it's not important. So chapter 18, verse 1, and Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law. So remember, Moses went to Jethro in Midian. He was the priest there, and when he was fleeing from, so Moses kills the Egyptian that was, beating one of the Hebrew slaves. He kills the Egyptian, flees because Pharaoh heard of it and wanted to kill him. So he flees, goes to Midian, helps Jethro's daughter, and I can't remember what her name was, Moses' wife. It's in like Exodus 3.
Sephora.
Yeah, Zephora. So it starts with a Z. Oh yeah, there it is, Zephora. So he helps Zephora and her sisters like water the flock or whatever. And he helped drive away a bunch of other shepherds, and then marries Jethro's daughter. Anyway, so that's who we're talking about here. So, and Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people. So Jethro is a priest of Midian, and I don't necessarily think, and we were talking about this in one of the other podcasts, I don't think Jethro was a believer in God. He was a priest of Midian, but I don't think he was a priest to the Lord Yahweh. I think he was just like a priest of, whatever gods the Midianites followed, although it could have been the God Yahweh, but I don't think it was the God of the Hebrews. But anyway, now it says that he had heard, so Jethro had heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, it's capital H, so it's God's people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back with her 2 sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his son. So before Moses and everybody flees Egypt, or I guess when they were fleeing Egypt, Moses sent his wife and his 2 kids back to live with Jethro in Midian. But anyway, Jethro comes with the 2 kids, right? So he came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness. So he comes with his daughter, he comes with his 2 grandsons, and he comes and meet Moses in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. Verse 6, now he said to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and with her 2 sons with her. So I guess he sent word to Moses ahead of time saying that that's what he was going to do. Verse 7. You want to read verse 7? I need some coffee.
Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Want to continue?
Yeah, so they went into this tent. So Moses here is showing his father-in-law some mad respect. And yeah, I guess that's I don't typically see that with like father-in-laws and the in-laws, but showing him a lot of respect. Verse 8, and Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord delivered them. Then Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he delivered out of the hands of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, and I think this is like the conversion. It's my personal belief that Jethro wasn't a believer in Yahweh, or like he didn't worship Yahweh. But verse 10 says, and Jethro said, blessed be the Lord. And it's referring to Yahweh, the name of the Lord. It said, blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Verse 11, now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods. So this is another reason why I don't believe he was a follower, but he's saying, now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods. For in this very thing in which they behaved proudly, he's talking about the Egyptians, he was above them. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and other sacrifices to offer God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. So it's like a whole family reunion. Like it's that celebration. Not just that like this guy, gets adopted into the tribe of Israel, which is my opinion as to what's going on right now. It's what it looks like to me. But it's also that like, oh man, like not only is it this guy's being adopted in the tribe of Israel, that's Moses' father-in-law. Like that's our leader's father-in-law, and Aaron and all the elders come. It's all the, most not necessarily important people, but it's just like, that's the core group, right? And they're all coming to eat with this guy. And so it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. It's like when Abraham, killed the fattened calf for God and his two angels with him when they came and met him. I think it was at the terebinth tree of Mamre. Verse 13, and so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, what is this thing that you're doing for the people? So Moses is judging all the people. People are coming to Moses morning till evening, being like, hey, we have this dispute. And Jethro is going to offer some wisdom here. He says, what is this thing that you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit and all the people stand before you from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws. So Moses is holding the statutes, holding the laws, holding, the commandments of God. He's the one that talks to God. God, like, audibly speaks to Moses, and everybody comes to him with their issues and quarrels and different things. Verse 17, so Moses' father-in-law said to him, the thing that you do is not good. Both you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out. And this makes a lot of sense. For this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. He says, stand before God for the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to God. And you shall teach them the statutes and laws, and show them the way in which they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. So what's going on here is Jethro is giving this advice. He's saying, okay, so stand before God and for the people. So get everybody together, stand before God, and then bring the difficulties to God. He says, teach everybody the statutes and the laws, show them the way they must walk, right? Teach everybody how to behave, and then start selecting able men. And the able men are going to be those that fear God. They're men of truth. They hate covetousness. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find those people with those three qualities, and you're going to place them to be rulers over thousands. And then under that are going to be rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And we're going to find out, and we already see that Israel went to war with the Amalekites. So Joshua went, and led the Israelites into battle against the Amalekites. This seems very militaristic to me, where you have like a squad, you know, a platoon, a company, a battalion, a brigade. So you have the rulers of thousands, which is like the brigade. You have the rulers of hundreds, which is like the battalion. Then you have the rulers of 50s, which is like the company, the tens, the platoon, you know, or what, you know, I didn't get to squads, but you get kind of the point is you have these groupings of leaders and then leaders within the leaders, so that Moses doesn't have to micromanage. And this is for the judgment and for like coming to people with disputes and like, okay, what do I do about this? What do I do about this? But this will also later, and this is just me inserting my opinion here, but this will also translate later into like when they go to fight in battle. But go ahead, what were you about to say?
Oh, nothing. Is this when the tribes get divided, or is that later on?
No, we haven't seen the tribes be divided yet. Well, actually, I think they were divided when they first exodused from Egypt, right before they crossed the Red Sea.
I don't think so.
Well, let's find out.
Oh, it's okay. We'll find out.
No, we're gonna find out because that's a good question.
I know we haven't covered it. Believe me, we haven't.
No, because I think they ordered themselves in a certain way when they left, but I could be wrong. We'll find out. I just don't want to hang too much on it, but that's a good question. Let me write that down. Will you write that down? I don't know where the Sharpie went.
I don't have a Sharpie either.
Okay, well, put it on your phone. So, verse 22. Verse 22, and let them judge the people at all times. So, like we said, we broke up everybody, blah, 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 and they're going to judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, and every small matter they shall themselves judge. So, if it's a huge thing, like, okay, this wasn't explicit in the law, what do we do? Then they're going to bring it to Moses. If it's a small matter that they know the law, they can handle it because they have the law. 22.5. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. Verse 23, if you do this thing and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will go also to their place in peace. So he's saying it's going to be easier for you. And this here he says, they will bear the burden with you. And that's a big parallel to like the church now. It's not the pastor's responsibility to make disciples of everybody in the congregation. Now, is it not his responsibility? Absolutely not. Of course it is his responsibility, but it's not the pastor's sole responsibility. Just like it's not Moses' sole responsibility to judge over all the people of Israel in every matter. Because remember, this, like, I think like 800,000 Israelites, I think, that like Exodus, I don't quote me on that number because it's probably wrong. But in terms of like the church today, we're supposed to bear with one another, and I wish I had some scripture to kind of back that up. I just don't know any off the top of my head. But in the church body, like for instance, we go to a Bible study. You know, Christopher leads it. So Christopher he's the ruler of the tens, you know, and then we go to the Loudon campus and we have like, for instance, I would say Dave, you know, he's the ruler of like the 50s or whatever. And then we got Justin and he's the ruler of the hundreds. And then David Platt, he's the ruler of like the thousands. So it's like you have all these judges in the midst. And then within that, there's just a whole bunch of different people that have given responsibilities, roles, and authorities, and we're all supposed to be bearing the burdens with one another and discipling each other and going out into the world and making disciples there. And it's like we are in charge of making the disciples when we go to DC and you know, break bread with like the homeless folks. And so it's like, you know, that's our little dominion, and not that it's for the sake of authority, it's for the sake of bearing burden with another. It's not so that we have power over one another. It's so that we bear the burden with one another. It's actually more of a servant role. because the one that's judging over the people is actually serving the people by interpreting the law and interpreting what God says so that we can make peace with one another. They're problem solving. They're not, judging in terms of, you go build my house. It's not that kind of authority. It's the authority of, okay, this is what God's word says. Let's break it down and let's settle these disputes and figure out what's the right thing to do in this situation. So everybody's bearing burdens with one another. Verse 23, it says, we already read it, but it says, if you do this thing and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace. Verse 24, so Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. When do you ever see anybody heeding the voice of their father-in-law? Verse 25, and Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10. So they judged the people at all times, and the hard cases they brought to Moses. But they judged every small case themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way to his own land. But he didn't depart without the knowledge of the Lord Yahweh. Because remember, Jethro was saying in verse 10, he said, blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. And he says in verse 11, now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, for in this very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. Okay, and then he took burnt offerings and other sacrifices to offer to God, and then Aaron and all the elders of Israel came to eat bread with Jethro and Moses. And so when Moses let his father-in-law depart, I think Jethro departed on his own, and Zipporah and his two sons, what was their names? I think Eliezer was one, and it was like, start with a G. Who were Moses' sons? Gershom and Eliezer. Yeah. So I think Zipporah, Gershom, and Eliezer stayed with Moses in the wilderness, and then Jethro departed and went back to his own land. We have time to do chapter 19, but this one I don't want to. I want to save it for next time. Do you have any thoughts, David, or do you want to continue?
How long is why don't you want
to We're good. We're good on time. We're only 27 minutes in.
I know, but why don't you want to do the...
Because there's just a lot to unpack. It's like, because in verse 19 we have, or chapter 19, Moses, or what it's the stuff about Mount Sinai, and then the 10 Commandments are given in chapter 20, and I don't want to get ahead because chapter 19 sets the stage for chapter 20. So I want to do those in one sitting. Because if we do 19, we're not going to have time for 20 because you got to.
Yeah, that's fine.
You got to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Me too. Okay. So any final thoughts for the people? You're flipping around in the Bible, man. I feel like you have a word.
I was actually looking for the tribes. I don't think the tribes have started until the book that I cannot pronounce. What's the third book of the
Leviticus?
The fourth?
Numbers?
Fifth?
Deuteronomy?
Yeah, that one. I think it's divided then.
Nah, I think they're divided long before then.
I don't think so. We'll see. We shall see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, my username is Sean. Literally, at my username is Sean. If you want to follow David, it's at David Pena 207. If you want to support the podcast, send me money. No, you can go to audibletrial.com/grace and glory. You get a free download of a book, any book, as long as they have the book, which they typically do. You probably know what Audible is. It's a pretty big company. And what that does is it lets you download a free book. You get a 30-day free trial, and then you can also support the podcast. And then if you would like to, man, give us a 5-star rating or a 1-star rating, but don't give us the 3-star rating. But if you want to actually rate us, maybe leave a little comment, a little review saying Sean's voice is gorgeous, or he needs to stop sneezing and having, take allergy pills, whatever you want to say. Just say what you want to say, but I want to hear from you guys. And if you don't want to follow me on Instagram, look me up on Instagram and DM me because we want to hear your thoughts. Maybe send me a selfie if you listen to the podcast because I want to like see the faces of the people listening, and I'll just put pictures on my Mac and look at you so I like know who I'm talking to. That'd be kind of cool. Kind of weird. David's looking at me like, that's weird, but I'm not normal. David, any final thoughts?
Nope. Got nothing.
Got nothing.
Share the gospel.
Share the gospel. Tell somebody about Jesus or Jesus or I don't know.
The Messiah.
Other languages. I don't know what God's called, but all right. Have a great day.